Sometimes weigh-ins between the best UFC fighters get out of control. There have been times when punches were thrown, up to the point where authorities had to interfere. But how has this affected the fighters in the match? Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's to stick around and continue watching. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell to get updated with the latest UFC news. Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier. When it comes to McGregor, there's rarely a dull moment. In the weigh-ins that led up to the UFC 178 bout against Dustin Poirier, McGregor proved to everyone that he had no remorse. Before the match with Dustin, the unbeatable Irishman had gotten under his opponent's skin with his typical behavior during the pre-fight. With almost every contestant that McGregor comes face-to-face with, he has a habit of doing the chicken dance, which could sometimes be humiliating and unbearable to the other fighter. In this case, Dustin was one of the fighters that had enough of McGregor acting in such a way. So at the weigh-in, the moment ended up with both of them getting into a fight right there and then. McGregor even attempted to give Dustin a full head slap while both of them were exchanging a few verbal jabs. And of course, UFC President Dana White was there in case things got ugly. When the day of UFC 178 finally arrived, McGregor managed to put Dustin down in just a couple of minutes and ended up winning the match. Ronda Rousey v. Holly Holm. The once UFC Women's Bantamweight champion Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm would go down after being part of the most memorable UFC fight in history for all mixed martial arts women's division. There is no doubt that their head-to-head confrontation in the pre-fight attracted a lot of attention, but most importantly, it left a lasting impression on all MMA fans. After stepping off the scale in the weigh-in, Ronda rushed to her opponent, who didn't even flinch from Ronda's intense behavior. Holmes even put her fist in the air to prompt a tussle between them. The situation got aggressive quickly, and as soon as the women were about to fight right on the spot, Dana White literally came between them to prevent the situation from escalating. Rousey then ended the moment by telling Holmes that she was going to get it in the ring. Well, Holmes did indeed get it in a very possible way. She actually managed to win the UFC Bantamweight Championship by defeating Ronda. The fight was considered a tragedy, as one of the most famous fighters in the UFC Women's Division got unexpectedly knocked out by a single head kick by Holmes. Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz. After the whole water bottle throwing incident went viral on all social media platforms, the tension between McGregor and Diaz reached an all-time high. This led to an intensive match at UFC 202, and when the two of them got head-to-head for a moment at the ceremonial weigh-ins, things got rather heated. Soon after, Diaz took a moment to flex his muscles on the scale. He hopped off and started staring down the legendary Irish fighter. McGregor didn't hesitate and immediately responded by putting his fist up in the air. This is when things started getting pretty ugly. The head-to-head confrontation got aggressive when Diaz got irritated by McGregor and thought it would be a good idea to throw some hands in the direction of his opponent. In just a split second, both McGregor and Diaz were fighting each other. The situation got so wild, the local authorities and even UFC President Dana White had to step in and try to separate the two. But this unexpected weigh-in moment wasn't so bad after all. It actually helped UFC 202 sell a total of 1.6 million pay-per-views, which is an unbelievable amount when compared to the ones sold for other matches. This was one of the biggest selling events in the company's history. And as for the winner of the fight, McGregor would end up earning a hard-fought majority decision victory. But it's obvious that both fighters got a bag filled with Benjamins when they got home. Anderson Silva versus Vitor Belfort. Despite both fighters having something in common, both of them were raised in the countryside. There was a lot of tension going on between them. Both Silva and Belfort are two of the biggest names in Brazilian mixed martial arts. Both fighters would clash in UFC 126. The tension between the two was mostly based on the statement that Belfort made when he was getting interviewed by MMA Junkie. During the interview, Belfort started discussing Silva. He said that Silva was wearing a mask and was not revealing who he truly was in public. According to Belfort, this was because Silva always said and did silly things when he was in front of the camera. This obviously made Silva feel embarrassed, even though he didn't really express it, and he decided to do something worthier the next time he would come face-to-face with Belfort. And on the day of the weigh-in, Silva came in wearing a mask. It looked as though he'd thought everything through, as he then continued to butt heads with Belfort. This moment soon became one of the most intense and unique pre-fight face-offs ever to be seen in UFC 126. For those who haven't seen the fight, well, let's just say that it would make anyone say, damn! Silva took Belfast down in one kick and continued punching him until after the fight was called off and victory was given to Silva. Not only did Silva win the middleweight title after his victory, but he even managed to shock everyone after he put his opponent away in the very first round. Ronda Rousey versus Bethe Correia. Brazilian UFC fighter Bethe Correia made a name for herself when she defeated Ronda Rousey's friends, Shayna Baszler and Jasmine Duke. In order to make herself stand out, Correia made a big controversial remark about Rousey. The Brazilian fighter claimed that the former Olympian had no life outside the UFC. Correia added that if Rousey lose even one match, she might even take her own life. But it turns out that this statement really hurt Ronda, as her father had taken his own life a couple of years ago. What Correia said was also seen as a very poor statement to make, and she received a lot of backlash from UFC fans. But things were not just left with that. Blood really started to boil when the two women came head-to-head at their weigh-in routine. During the moment, Rousey didn't hesitate to walk towards Correia and invade her space. Correia didn't want to risk this moment going to waste, and made the most of it by screaming right in front of Ronda's face. This moment would end up being one of the most memorable pre-fight exchanges, but as good as it was, the fight between the two was more of a one-sided affair. The fight devastated all viewers that had paid for it, as it only lasted 34 seconds. It seemed that Ronda didn't waste one single second to knock Correia out for all of the horrible things that she said about her on national television. John Jones versus Rashad Evans. Before the 2012 match these fighters had, they used to be good friends, or even once considered teammates. But soon after their fight, their strong friendship became bitter and the two started seeing each other as rivals. Jones and Evans were scheduled to fight at UFC 145, and when they headed into the match, Evans was fully focused on winning this lightweight crown by becoming the first fighter to beat Jones inside the cage. The pre-fight moments between the two clearly reveal the hatred they had between two former friends that had turned to enemies. The world witnessed them get all up in each other's faces in a really awkward exchange. Even though both fighters had their blood boiling and were ready to throw some hands right then and there, they kept their emotions in check while waiting impatiently for the cage doors to close. In the end, Jones managed to claim victory. Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald. Lawler and McDonald both took part in a pair of fights that were both brutal and memorable all at once. But the thing worth mentioning is their head-to-head encounter in the weigh-ins that led up to their second match. Their encounter created an excellent prelude to the fight that would take place between them. After the weigh-in, Lawler walked straight up towards McDonald, which was met with a clenched fist right next to his face. This made the stare down between the two really tense. But what made the situation escalate was when the welterweight champ whacked Rory's hand out of his face. What made the weigh-in even more worthy was the fact that they soon let out all the tension created inside the octagon. All the tension and hype they created was worth all the attention they got when the two fought one-on-one. In the end, Lawler ended up claiming victory in the fight that was later considered to be one of the greatest in UFC history. Which one of the weigh-in moments was your favorite? Don't forget to tell us in the comments. As always, thanks for watching, guys.